Hello, everyone. Welcome to Getting to Know You. This week, our guest is Jeff Altenburg, longtime parishioner of St. Sebastian's and DA of the city of Milwaukee. Is that right? Did I get that right?
I'm a deputy district attorney in Milwaukee County.
Yeah, what did I say?
Yeah. So you said attorney in the city of Milwaukee. So we have city attorneys representing the city, and then district attorney who represents all of the county, and we focus on criminal activity, versus the city attorney has a whole array of items that they focus on dealing simply with the city of Milwaukee.
Okay, I apologize for that. I'm learning. That's the point of these interviews. So thanks, Jeff, for agreeing to do the interview. How are you today?
I'm great, and thank you very much for this invitation.
Absolutely. I was just thinking about I ran into you at Mass, and I've been wanting to ask you and Rana if you guys would be willing to do these interviews. And Lisa said you should ask Rana, and I said I'm going to, but I saw Jeff first. So
well, I appreciate that. Although I think Rana is the much more interesting interview. Her story incredible, not only on a personal level but on a professional level.
Absolutely, and she actually was my wife and my first encounter with St. Sebastian. She gave us our tour of the school, I don't know, 11 years ago or something like that. Couldn't have been
at a school open house.
Yeah, the school open house. She couldn't have been more gracious, and we still talk about. We remember walking out of there saying, "Oh, there's good people here." Yeah.
Well, that's excellent, and thankfully she was your tour guide and not me, because maybe you wouldn't have ended up at Seb's. We both love St. Sebastian and are true believers in it. But I am really glad that she was your tour guide, because she really tells the story in the appropriate way.
Yeah, she was wonderful, and just her tone and her spirit was so great too. So coming attractions, interview with Rana coming down the pike.
Excellent.
But since I have you here, Jeff, tell me a little bit. Tell us about you. I don't know. People, I'm sure, see you at Mass as an usher, but definitely you have a prominent position in the city and the county. But I'm not sure how much people know of that. So if you could just tell us about you, that'd be awesome.
Sure. Well, I've been. I actually grew up in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, central Wisconsin, and went to a Christian Brothers high school there called Stevens Point Pacelli. And so clearly was raised Catholic in a community of 22,000 people that has 5 Catholic churches. So Catholicism is deeply ingrained in Stevens Point in central Wisconsin, and it was deeply ingrained in me as a youngster with my mother and father and 3 siblings. I was fortunate. I consider myself fortunate because my father became a very big Marquette University basketball fan when I was very young, and he ended up getting season tickets. And so as I was in middle school and junior high and grade school, we'd come down to Milwaukee for Marquette games all of the time.
From Stevens Point?
From Stevens Point. And literally, oftentimes they were weekends, but if they were a weekday game, he would pick us up from school. We would drive to Milwaukee. We would go to the game. We would drive and stay in Fond du Lac in a hotel, and then get up very early in the morning so we could be back in school the next morning. And we did this repeatedly. I tell people these stories, and they're like, "You guys were a little nutso there." Yeah. But and I only say that because it introduced me to Marquette University, and but for that, I don't know that I would have chosen to go to Marquette. Because I went to a Christian Brothers high school, there were a couple Christian Brothers colleges that I was looking at. There were a couple other smaller schools in Minnesota and Iowa that I was focused on. But again, I kept coming back to Milwaukee and Marquette because of my experiences around basketball.
It's good. Yeah. Sometimes our motivating factor, is a door that opens up to
exactly. New things. Right. And honestly, I couldn't have been more lucky. My experience at Marquette was transformational. I got involved in student government at Marquette. Ultimately, that's how I met my wife, but she should really tell you that story because she tells it much differently than I do.
Well, you know what? It would be fun to compare. So why don't you tell it?
Yeah. All right. Well, so my junior year at Marquette, I was running for student body vice president. And as you can imagine, I was campaigning all over campus. At one point, I was campaigning, I was in Central Campus, right between the old Union and Joan of Arc, just trying to meet people. And we actually had this dog that lived in our house that had a little placard, Altenburg for vice president, that was running through the campus trying to attract people to come to the Central, and it worked. And unbeknownst to me, one of those people that I talked with that day and shook hands and had a great conversation was my soon to be, eventually beautiful wife, Rana Altenburg. I don't really remember that because I literally met hundreds of people that day. And of course, as the seasoned politician that I was trying to be, every conversation was deeply poignant and meaningful. And so evidently she remembered it much better than I did. And then we reconnected after I graduated. I was working for a U.S. congressman in Milwaukee, and she actually was interning. And that's how we really, in my opinion, truly met and started dating, and dated all through my period in law school, and got married and moved to Washington, D.C. once I finished up law school.
Wow. Okay. I have a few questions. First of all, what was your interest in political life, whether it was student government or interning later?
Well, I was a poli-sci major. I was fairly active in high school around social justice and around volunteering, and frankly, simply just being part of the community and trying to do things that make a difference in your community. And to me, politics, whether you like it or not, politicians greatly impact things that happen in the community, both at the local, state, and federal level. So I was always interested in service. I eventually became interested in public service. So I think it made sense to me to run for student government to get more involved in what was going on at Marquette. And I really, really enjoyed that experience. I'd been a senator for a couple of years, and then I ran and ultimately was elected vice president. And, we did a lot of, in my opinion, good things at Marquette during the time we were there.
That's great. I a lot of times I talk to students about, those 2 feet of justice, the works of charity, but also the works of advocacy.
Right.
You're much more poised to do that in a position like that. The advocacy part, which is harder to do because you're tackling systems rather than individual behaviors and all that.
That's absolutely right. And ultimately, that's what's led me to the work that I'm doing today, because when I graduated from law school from UW-Madison, we went out to Washington. We got married, and we both got jobs in Washington, D.C. And I was a government lawyer for a government agency, and my wife became a lobbyist, a very successful lobbyist. At some point, obtained Marquette University as a client, and so when we moved back, she continued to represent Marquette, and eventually was hired by Marquette. Yeah. I was in private. So in Washington, D.C., I worked for a government agency for about 5 years within their general counsel's office, litigating on behalf of pensioners. So I worked for an agency called the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, which ultimately is the insurance company that takes over failed pension plans. So when Alice Chambers, for example, went bankrupt here in Milwaukee, the PBBC steps in and guarantees benefits to the pensioners.
Oh, that's important.
So that was interesting work. But what I loved the most about it was we had independent litigating authority. So I actually was in the courtroom throughout the country, either in bankruptcy court or federal district court, litigating over those limited dollars that should have been going to the pensioners. Wow. So we came back to Milwaukee. Rana eventually was hired by Marquette, and I was working for a large law firm here in town doing employee benefits, but not feeling like I was really impacting anything in Milwaukee or my community. I was representing clients. It was mostly a tax advising practice, and frankly, I missed being in the courtroom. So after about 2 years at that firm, I started talking with the district attorney's office and was fortunate to be hired by then district attorney Mike McCann back in 1997, and have been doing that job ever since.
Since 1997?
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
It's a pretty good turn.
Yeah, and I honestly, in my humble opinion, it's the best job you can have as a practicing attorney, because you're doing things usually in a courtroom, and so oftentimes in an adversarial fashion, but off equally in a fashion where you're doing what's best for everyone in the courtroom, what's best for the defendant, what's best for the victim, and ultimately what's best for the community, and that's what I love about the job. And in the position that I'm currently in as a deputy, so in Milwaukee, there are about 130 assistant district attorneys between the adult and children's court system.
Okay.
There's obviously one elected DA. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention his name is John Chisholm. And then there are 7 deputy DAs that help him oversee the office and manage it. And I'm one of those 7, and I get to oversee. I oversee general crimes, which is our largest unit that handles, as the name implies, most general crimes that come into our office. But I also oversee 2 specialty units. One is the community prosecution unit that places prosecutors in the community, working in neighborhoods with the police and with other both government and non-government entities to try to proactively solve problems in those neighborhoods. But then the other area I oversee is called the early intervention unit, which with the use of risk assessment, tries to identify ways in which we can hold people accountable short of the full criminal justice process. And we can talk more about that. In fact, I believe I spoke a lot about this program at Divine Savior Holy Angels for a particular incredibly talented teacher there. And we talked about race and its impact on the criminal justice system. And I focused a lot on what we're trying to do to break down some of those racial barriers and collateral consequences that people of color feel when they interact with the criminal justice system.
Well, let me put you on the spot then, and be the first to say that sounds like an excellent conversation and a longer conversation. And I have a plan to do maybe after the pandemic some kind of soup and substance speaker series. I would love to have you talk about that more.
And I would love to do it because it very much feels in accord with my personal faith system, my love for Saint Sebastian. And I do feel like there's oftentimes a disconnect between what happens in the district attorney's office and the criminal justice system and what the community understands is happening. So I would love to do that.
Yeah, in the last 4 minutes, I've learned so much. I fully admit I did not understand that the system that you operate out of. So that's been very informative. Thank you. I mean, it sounds like a lot of, it sounds intense. Is it a stressful job?
It is. It's very stressful. But you know what? When I have stress in doing things that I know are directly impacting people and families in this community, I can handle that. I mean, it just, as most days, the time just flies by. Unlike a lot of the practice of law, you're not billing clients in 6-minute increments, or you're not watching the clock. You're problem solving. You're ultimately trying to do things that will benefit your community. And the great thing about the areas I oversee is a lot of my work is trying to figure out creative ways not to put people directly into the criminal justice system, but still to hold them accountable and repair the harm that they've done either in their neighborhood or to particular victims. So there's stress, but I think it's easier to manage that stress when you're doing something that's truly meaningful to you.
And it has felt very meaningful to you.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, again, I love this job. I'm very thankful that I get the opportunity to work with DA Chisholm and do the things. And, my last 10 years have been all about system change. So it takes me back to the way I was thinking at Marquette. I wanted to be involved in something where I could truly do meaningful system change. And I really am doing it, not by myself, and I'm not This is not about Jeff Altenburg, but it is about a concerted effort, I think, throughout the Milwaukee criminal justice system to do things in a different way.
Well, it's excellent. I think we hear so much about just the problems and the broken systems.
Yeah,
To,
right.
to hear directly from someone that's feeling like, yeah, but inside we're moving, we're moving the right direction, which is good.
Right.
Do you have and I can cut this out if if you don't, but do you have much experience with like restorative justice?
I do, and that's one of the areas that I oversee. So we have an in-house community conferencing and restorative justice program
Hmm.
that used to be run by one of my colleagues, David Lerman, who was an assistant district attorney in our office for quite a while. Unfortunately, David passed away about, I think it's almost 10 years now,
Wow.
of cancer. And we continue to run that program as part of our overall early intervention program. So we try to identify cases where victims are interested in having a direct conversation with the offender in an attempt to make sure that both parties kind of hear each other out. And it is incredibly powerful, very, very powerful. And ultimately, usually results in the parties being much more satisfied, even though the offense is still has occurred and the harm has occurred, but some of that harm is repaired through that conversation.
Yeah, the reason I ask, I mean, yeah, it doesn't erase what happened, but
Right.
there's a potential for healing there. And I guess as a transition, it reminds me of, and everything that you're describing reminds me of like looking at this through a faith-based lens. How do we lend mercy and reconciliation? How do we do those things? So I guess it's my transition to ask you to tell me a little bit about your faith. You mentioned how St. Sebastian's is important to you, but
Yeah.
and how you grew up in a very faithful place. But
Right.
describe it in your own words to me.
Yeah. Well, and again, my faith, my Catholic faith, my belief in Christ has been predominant my entire life. And it's been supported by my parents, by my family, by my education. And I just, I feel so fortunate that when we came back to Milwaukee, my wife was smart enough to say, let's go check out parishes before we decide where we're going to live. And we looked at a couple, but mostly due to Rob and Therese Shelley, we focused early on St. Sebastian, and we've been there ever since. Both our girls went to St. Seb school. We have always tried to be active within the parish, notwithstanding our other busy jobs and
Right.
busy life. My wife and I ran the auction for a couple of years, which is a huge undertaking, which is going on right now. In fact,
Correct. Yes.
I was just bidding. So hopefully that is successful, notwithstanding this pandemic and the social distancing that everybody's feeling.
Don't outbid my wife. She's trying to win the door painting thing. I don't know
there's no way you should have told me that, John. I would never do that to your lovely wife. And I'm currently on the parish council, and my motivation in joining the parish council was being the liaison to the school, because I continue to believe that we just have this incredible gem at St. Sebastian. And I think a lot of our parishioners know about it, but not everyone. And I know, I'm looked at some of the survey results, there still is this concern that there's a disconnect between the school, the families that attend the school, and the parish. And so I think we're incredibly well suited at this point because of you coming to SEBS, Father Peter Patrick being at SEBS. Heather Grams is just an amazing, fantastic administrator. So that's really what motivates my faith and motivates my participation in St. Seb's.
Everything you said makes so much sense, but especially this idea of that there is so much support for the school, but there is, I mean, if we're truthful, there's some disconnect there, right?
Yeah, right.
And I've worked in enough Catholic parishes to know that that's a very normal thing. Because the schools operate, school is a whole organization, it's operating, the parish is a whole organization, and of course there's never enough people or resources to go around to serve those things in the best way possible, so you end up kind of like running two hamster wheels next to each other. But I couldn't agree with you more. People might have saw the interview with Mr. Bill last week, who is the director of, or 2 weeks ago, who was the director of St. Coletta's. I continue to say it's such a wonderful, wonderful relationship between Seb School and just we feel so blessed that our kids are there. And I really do thank Rana for making such a good impression on us, first of all. But in addition to that, I think it's an important message because we're only stronger together. We are part of one big mission, and that is the Catholic mission of St. Sebastian's, and we have so much we have so much strength together, and we're such wonderful things. So finding ways to support each other is just excellent. So
exactly, and the fact that we're a choice school and the diversity that brings to our school and ultimately to our parish is, again, one of the reasons that attracted Rana and I. I can't tell you the benefits that our two girls experienced through participation at St. Seb's, and then of course Divine Savior also. But that was just a natural path for them.
Yeah,
that's a great goal that we have.
That's good. The other thing I just want to comment on is how you said that you guys really, as you were looking to come back to Milwaukee, identified that we're trying to identify a parish before a house. That I don't think that's the norm.
And again, I give all the credit to my beautiful and talented wife, than I am, and that was the motivating factor. And truth be told, we lived in Arlington, Virginia, and we didn't do that. We found a condo that we really liked. We bought it, and then we realized what the nearby parish was, and it turned out to be just not a great fit for us at all. It was not what I would call close to being a progressive parish that really, I think, replicated the teachings of Jesus Christ. It seemed to be more fixated on the hierarchy and the patriarchy of the church. So certainly that helped us and helped guide my wife to make the brilliant decision she made.
Yeah, it's good awareness too. I think there's different expressions of how to live out your Catholicism. Both and all are valid, but yeah, finding the right fit for you is important, I think, so that you can utilize your gifts and be engaged in the parish. I know you're also an usher, or usher, right? Yeah. Why do you do that?
Well, I like to be involved in SEBS. I have been a Eucharistic minister. And so early on during the pandemic, I did that. But I think part of the rationale for me becoming an usher was we wanted to add the 10:30 Mass. Oh, yeah. And I think there was a shortage of ushers. And there was also a concern, and rightly so, that perhaps some of our older parishioners that were serving as ushers were not as willing to do it or with great frequency. So Dylan Ambrose, to his credit, being our leader of our parish council and being a leader in the parish, put a crew together, and I was fortunate enough to be part of that crew, and really appreciate the opportunity to do it. It's tough. It's tough to ask people questions about their health before they get to come and worship, but I understand that's part and parcel of what we need to do to make sure everybody's safe.
Yeah, my kids don't watch this, so it's going to be okay. But I joke every time they get asked to drop off at school as we're driving up, I'm going to say, okay, they're going to ask you if you have diarrhea today.
Yeah, it does seem a little personal. Yeah, since I have aches and pains every day, I really feel like sometimes I'm not being totally honest in answering those questions.
Yeah, well, I think at this point we all kind of understand a little bit of the difference between some of those. And we really have learned to adapt to the new normal, as we say. Right. But I as you as an usher, or Brian and his crew that are cleaning, or Father Peter Patrick or Mike, and I've said this in other interviews, the protocols that are in place make me feel incredibly safe, and I agree. I do feel like it's a safe place to be. There's good distancing, and people have been really respectful to one
I
another.
think we've done a fantastic job of navigating that issue, and I give Mike and Father all the credit in the world, because
Yeah.
you feel safe. Things are well thought out, and it's great to be able to be back in mass.
Yeah, yeah, and you just kind of hope that that keeps growing. I mean, we're not out of the woods yet, but we see the light at the end of the tunnel, and
Yep.
that continues to grow and grow. And then additional shout out to Dylan Ambrose, who, I mean, he's wonderful, and has such an inviting personality to say,
Yeah.
yeah, come
Yeah.
do this with us.
Yeah.
I was gonna joke. There's an old Ray Romano episode where Ray's dad is an usher, and Ray wants to be an usher, and he says, "You can't do this. You got to work your way up. You get to sit in the back and tell jokes."
Yeah, well, right. I feel like because Dylan is so ably mentored by his beautiful and talented wife, that her personality rubs off on him, and therefore rubs off on us too.
Absolutely. Shout out to Molly Ambrose. She's a rock
Yeah.
star too. Yeah. I mean, that when I started this, I've done interviews almost every week except a break over the holidays. Every weekend. At first I was like, I hope I have enough people. Now it's very clear to me that there's so many.
Well, it is a great thing you're doing, and I really appreciate it. I think we have absolutely fantastic parishioners at SEBS that do a variety of amazing things in our community that not everyone knows about. So this is an opportunity to give them a platform, and at the same time bring us a little together. That's a blessing.
Doing the best we can in the circumstances we have. So, Jeff, my last question for you is, as you think about the future, whether it's for the parish or for the world, what do you hope for?
Well, I think we talked a little bit about, I continue to want to see growth in our parish, in the relationship between the parish and the school.
Mm-hmm.
And as you pointed out, it is difficult, but it can be done. We can do it. I think there's Father Peter Patrick is committed to trying to do more of a family mass, either on a monthly basis or on a bi-monthly basis, that will allow parishioners with small children to come and be comfortable in mass. I mean, I am a firm believer that as a young married couple with small children, it is incredibly difficult for you to get yourself to mass. And if you feel like you're being ostracized or you're being judged because you have a child that is crying or is antsy or wants to walk around, then you're not going to come. And that's not the atmosphere that we have at St. Seb's. And we have to make sure that our young parishioners, as we try to continue to grow our parish, understand that. And I think, I mean, we are so blessed with Father Peter Patrick. He is one of the most joyous human beings I've been around. So that can spread, and there's no doubt that people at St. Robert's understood that about him and were so envious that he was coming to our parish. So we need to continue to grow that. And my other major hope for the future is that we continue as a community and as a country to do what we can to focus on this conversation around race.
Yeah.
I grew up in a predominantly white small town that really didn't deal with issues around white privilege or racial disparity. And I've come to Milwaukee and been in Milwaukee for almost 30 years now. And I see the tremendous impact that disparity and that racism has. And I don't profess to have all the answers, or frankly any of the answers, because it's an incredibly complicated issue. But I do think that our work in this area as a community needs to continue, and I do have hope, a lot of hope that is going to continue to be at the forefront of our parish and hopefully our community.
I do have hope for that too, and I do think SEBS is light years beyond a lot of other parishes and where they're at with their commitment. I mean, the Facing Racism group is incredibly impressive with 5 different subcommittees that are very active. And I was like you, that was something I didn't bring into my awareness until I was an adult. I, grew up in great suburbs, and I just, it's one of the things that it absolutely attracts me to this place, is that this open spirit, this welcoming spirit, and this kind of upholding everybody's dignity. And your word for Father Peter Patrick, joyful, is absolutely the way I describe him too. I agree with you on that, and I hope that his spirit continues to be contagious in this parish, because we could all use a little joy, especially right now.
Yeah, and I will note that I have found him to be a little more joyful as of late, because he's got some new Marquette wear that he's been sporting around the rectory. So I think that's great for all of us.
Yeah, we could all use some new gear sometimes, right?
Exactly.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for taking some time for us to get to know you a little bit, understand the important work you do, and also reaffirm like passion and commitment to this parish, and the kinds of work we can do to continue to build bridges and build up the community.
Thank you, John. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Blessings to you. We'll see you soon. Thanks.